Hi, this is Charles Phoenix, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guile. This week, we're back poolside in Palm Springs at the swanky U.S. Modernist compound during Modernism Week. Today, we're all about two architects, Chicago's Mies van der Rohe and Florida's Gene Leedy. Our first guests are Iveta Cerna and Dirk Lohan. Iveta is the director of the Villa Tugendhat in Brno in the Czech Republic. Dirk is the grandson of Mies van der Rohe and an architect in his own right. Later on, we'll also hear from Max Strang, an archivist of Gene Leedy and his impressive Florida architecture. And heading up the U.S. Modernist delegation, about 40 people this year, it's your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Today, some shameless self-promotion, because we've discovered that many people who listen to this podcast are not aware of our extensive archives. In an era where inspiration is as fleeting as a social media feed, the U.S. Modernist Library is a meticulously curated archive offering a deep dive into the rich tapestry of American architecture. More than just a repository of magazines, this project is an indispensable tool for architects, the media, realtors, historians, and even the most devoted architecture fan. By diligently digitizing and making freely available about 5 million pages of U.S. architecture and design periodicals, our team of woefully underpaid staff and intrepid volunteers have spent the last 12 years toiling away, unlocking knowledge that was confined to dusty archives and private collections.
Imagine studying the original presentations of case study houses in Arts and Architecture magazine, or delving into the technical innovations showcased in early issues of Architectural Record. The media, from journalists to documentary filmmakers, use the U.S. Modernist Library as an essential resource for authentic visuals and in-depth historical context. Need to illustrate an article on brutalist architecture? Looking for period advertisements showcasing interior design trends of the 1970s? Let's face it, you're not just going to trudge down to the library. Everyone wants this online. Publications are viewable, downloadable, printable, and searchable. And did we mention they were free to access?
The U.S. Modernist Library goes back to the 1890s with buildings and also the materials used, the lifestyles and visions, and the debates shaping architecture. We've got an impressive array of over 100 well-known publications, from Progressive Architecture to Architectural Forum to House and Garden, plus over 100 AIA state and local titles, most of which are gone. Our mission is to scan all U.S. architecture and design magazines, and we're about 80% there, but we can't do it without your help. To achieve this, USModernist.org actively raises funds to support acquisition, digitization, and preservation.
And we have donors. They include Pay Cobb Freed, Pay Partners, the Smithsonian Institution, UNC Greensboro, the Paul Rudolph Institute for Modern Architecture, University of Hawaii Manoa, Atomic Ranch, AIA National, Savannah College of Art and Design, Palm Springs Museum of Art, Cranbrook, the Baltimore Museum of Art, the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and Michael Razzo, among others.
See for yourself at usmodernist.org/library and donate to the project at usmodernist.org/donate. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Mies van der Rohe is one of the names that's on everybody's lips when they talk about modernist architecture. He left behind a variety of structures around the world, including some very unique houses. We'll talk today about the Farnsworth House, and we'll talk also today about the Villa Tugendhat in, how do you pronounce it, Iveta?
Brno.
Brno?
Brno.
Brno. As you might expect, as with all modernist houses, they require a lot of maintenance. They are sometimes expensive to renovate. And so we're going to talk today with these two about these houses and their stories and how they're still with us today, which is very fortunate. So, Iveta, let's start with you. How did the Villa Tugendhat come to be?
Wow. Just now we mentioned that when Dirk was for the first time in Brno, it was in 1969. So it was a Prague Springs. It means that it was really the first whole of being in a democracy.
This is Alexander Dubček?
Yeah.
Was
Dubček, yeah. And it was in that time when Mies was ill in that time, so he was as a member of the family.
Mies died in that year.
Yeah.
So
68?
Yeah.
69, okay.
Yeah. And it was the time of National Gallery, isn't it?
Yes.
So important things which was demonstrated by the Architectural Office of Chicago. And it was there even the promise that the Chicago office can help us with the restoration of the house. Because it took more than 40 years. The house was listed as monument, as a UNESCO monument, the World Heritage Monument. And there was also responsibility that we have to do something with this. Something. We were finally able to restore the house in an extremely good quality.
The house was finished in 1929.
Yeah.
Mies had only in the 20s become a modernist architect. And the one building that already existed was the Barcelona Pavilion.
Yeah, 1 year
which
after.
was famous as well.
Yes.
But the Tugendhat house, the family Tugendhat was German-speaking Jewish family in Brno, and they met Mies in Berlin, and they invited him, and so and so, and he then designed this house. And it is a fabulous house. It's an upscale, upper-class property with a beautiful view over the valley. It's as if you had a house up there on the mountain, you know.
Here in Palm Springs.
Yes.
Yeah.
It must have caused quite a stir in 1930.
It did. It was published widely,
Yeah.
etc. But they lived in it only 5-6 years, and then came,
8
of course,
years. They lived there only 8 years. Yeah.
8 years?
8 years.
8 years. And they then fled because Nazis had taken over Czechoslovakia, and they went to Switzerland and from there to Venezuela, which is interesting because a couple of their children were born in Venezuela and grew up there. During the Nazi time, the German army, I think, used the house for officers or whatever. And then when the Russians came at the end of the war, the Russian army moved into the house with their horses, which is amazing.
Yeah.
They had
it's
horses
really,
in the
really
living
the
room.
story of the house is a little bit reflecting the story of 20th century.
That's right.
So it's reflecting the Second World War, it's reflecting division of Czechoslovakia. And on the other hand, we have to say, it wasn't mentioned till now, that it's the most authentic house of Mies van der Rohe in Europe.
In Europe, yeah.
So it's something incredible, which exists till now. So during the restoration, we did a lot of work.
The other thing, Mies designed some furniture, as we all know. The Barcelona chair is known for that, and there is a Tugendhat chair. So it's interesting that his furniture designs were made for specific projects, and they still carry that name today.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And they're wildly popular.
Yes, oh yes.
Now, let's shift to another house. The Farnsworth House in Plano, Illinois, is also a great place to visit.
Sure.
I've been there a couple of times. It has a great adversary, which is the Fox River,
Right.
which comes up and gobbles it up from time to time.
Yes.
When was that house started?
That house was started after World War II, 46, which is rather soon after the war. Mm-hmm. And it was not finished until 51, which is an enormously long time, 5 years for a little house like this. But Mies and the client, Edith Farnsworth, a medical doctor, they had a difficult relationship and couldn't agree, and she didn't want to pay more.
It's a really strong story as well as a Tugendhat house. So it's really strong, this storytelling of the whole.
Yeah.
I've heard there was a movie in development about the Farnsworth house for years.
Yeah.
That's true. There was, but it hasn't
Gone
come
anywhere
out
yet?
anywhere out yet, no. I myself am involved with a producer in L.A. To do a Mies van der Rohe film, and we hope that this year, 2025, we will come out with that film.
Oh, has it been shot already?
We have 200 hours of shots.
Wow.
Who's playing Mies?
No, nobody's playing Mies, but I'm the main narrator.
Okay.
So it's a documentary.
Okay.
It's a documentary.
Not a scripted drama.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
it's not a...
Who's
it's
producing it, Dirk?
Catherine Lowe is her name.
Okay.
L-O.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever heard of her?
Yes, I have.
You have?
Yes.
Amazing.
Well, in the documentary world, she's well known.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I hope it's a relief.
Well, she's from Hong Kong, but she studied filmmaking here at USC in California. She lives in L.A.
Iveta, after the war, what happened to the house? What stages did it pass through?
It's a story of the Europe.
The horses.
Horses and this kind of horrible things, which was really going to destroy the house. Yeah, it really was very, very bad situation.
What shape was the house in before the war?
Before the war,
it
you mean
over, like,
between
right
the wars?
Yeah,
we are talking
that's
about
right.
between the
Yes, but
wars.
before the Second World War.
So it was the best time because in that time the Czechoslovakia was even one of the most industrialized republic in the world. So it means that we were quite a rich country with a democracy and so on and so on. But it really finished with the communist.
With the Nazis and then the communists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after that, it was used as a dance school, which was quite good. I think.
Dance school?
Dance school.
I imagine dancing in that structure would be wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
And after that, there was another activity. It was for the children who had a problem with a spinal defect.
Like a sanatorium, sort of?
No, rehabilitation, we
Okay.
can say. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in fact, the Tugendhat house, it's interesting to me, from 1945, the end of World War II, all the way to 1969, it languished. Nothing was done.
That's almost 25.
I heard stories
Yeah.
from some historians that told me that the neighbors had some of the original furniture in their own houses now. In other words, it sort of migrated around. But in 1969, I went there for the first time. Mies was, in fact, invited to come, but he couldn't come, and he said, "Why don't you go?"
It was because Prague Spring. So
Yes, it was the Prague Spring, and there was an architect, Kalivoda,
Yeah.
who wanted to restore the house. So 1969.
It is.
By that time, the Berlin Museum was already built. In other words, it was a little late.
So when did it pass into public hands or some entity that was going to take care of it? When did that happen?
I think the early 70s.
It was finally calculated as a UNESCO monument in 2001.
So it was government property? Is that
It's city property.
city property?
City
Okay.
municipal.
The city owns
City
it.
property,
Okay.
so it's city responsibility.
Yes.
But very, very important that we try to find a way of connections to the best specialists of the world.
Mm-hmm.
We founded the special committee named Tugendhat House International Committee. One of the best way how to restore the house.
This was
in
in
the same-
2008, 2010, somewhere in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to understand that the family still existed. And in a way, it was their property. And they had to agree to give it or to release their rights to it.
To the city.
To make it a public enterprise.
Yes.
They didn't claim it back to live in it.
Well, let's switch back to the Farnsworth. So Edith Farnsworth lived there for how long, Dirk?
Until the early 70s, so 20 years or something like that.
Okay.
And then I was actually with Peter Palumbo, Lord Palumbo,
Lord Palumbo?
from London.
Right.
Who had worked with your father, I believe, on a building in London for quite a long time.
Lloyd's Bank.
Yes.
We were trying to do a headquarters building for the bank on a property he owned right in Mansion House Square area. And in the end, didn't materialize. But Peter Palumbo became a good friend of Mies's, but also mine. And one day I took him around Chicago when he came to visit to show him the city and the architecture of Chicago. And during that trip, he asked me, what would Mies say if I asked him to design me a house in Scotland on an island?
Yeah.
And I said, well, that sounds good, but I don't know what he would say. He's over 80 years old now, and that may not be the most interesting possibility.
Had he ever done any design in Britain, the British Isles?
No.
Okay.
No.
So Palumbo bought the house in Plano.
But he bought the house. He said, and I was the one then at that moment, after he asked me about this house he wanted designed, I said, but the best Mies house is on the market. And he said, where is that? I said, it's the Farnsworth house, and it's an hour from here. He said, can we go there? I said, yes. We turned around and drove right out. It was sitting empty, and there was a big sign that for sale right in front of the house. It was ugly like hell.
Timing is everything.
Yes.
And he got enamored with the house, and he then went to Italy, where she had moved. She spoke Italian and had translated some Italian poetry into English and so on. He visited her in the Florence area, and he eventually bought the house, and then he asked me, would I take care of it? And I said, sure, because I was knowledgeable about the house and I was dedicated to it. And I fixed it up, whatever needed to be done. And for another 25 years, maybe, he owned the house.
And when did it shift to the National Trust?
After, like, say, around 2000.
Okay.
They bought it at auction in Sotheby's.
It was the so-called third life of the house.
Yeah, the third life of this house. The second one is Palumbo. First one, Edith Farnsworth. And now the National Trust. And it's a public museum.
Yes.
You can go there, and there's a shop and things not in the house, but separate from it.
As well, in Tugendhat House, it's open for public. So it's so-called Monument of Modern Architecture. So we have more than 60,000 people in a year coming in. And
To Tugendhat?
Yeah.
60,000?
60,000 per year.
That's more than the Farnsworth House, because it's an hour away from Chicago in the country, and it takes almost a day to go there, and But it's iconic. Young architects the world over know this house.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
It's in everybody's consciousness as an architect. Yeah.
The house has been flooded several times by the Fox River, which is adjacent.
Yes.
And I've heard there have been some really interesting schemes to try to fix this. The one I heard about is they were going to put the whole house on hydraulic jacks and just crank it up.
My idea.
What's happening with that?
It's dormant because lack of money.
Right.
We're talking $2 million to do this properly, because you have to dig around each column. There are 8 columns, and put a small hydraulic machine under there and make sure that it is safe and good and not visible. And the idea would be that when there are floods coming, you push a button and the house slowly rises and stays dry.
Very cool.
Because the biggest flood was in 1996.
Okay.
When Peter Palumbo still owned it, and it went 5 feet into the living area.
5 feet high and up the walls.
Yes. And all the wood paneling and was damaged.
I was surprised that the level of the, this...
the watermark?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Boy.
There was a streak on the wood and on the curtains.
Yeah.
So can they do anything on the river portion to try to block the river from coming up? Is that a plan?
They could, of course, but it would change the landscape.
Yeah.
Like Holland, you have to build dikes.
Yeah.
I'm against that, because the house is specifically designed and located where it is. And if you change all of this and the river never floods, it's fine if the river floods a few feet over the ground. That's what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
But modern man has paved over so many floodplains upstream. The water doesn't sink into the ground anymore.
So this is a change that's gotten worse over the years.
Yes.
Because of development. And
But since 1960 to 1996, there hasn't been any big flood like this. So for some reason, it seems to be,
Well, that's good news.
at least it has been safe for 25 years now. Yeah.
Iveta, when the Tugendhat house had to be renovated, you had to raise quite a number of funds for that, pull together that blue ribbon committee that you talked about. When did the renovations finish?
10 years ago.
10 years ago, so 2015?
And and we had the troubles with nature. You know, house is located on the slope. It's all the time moving, very slowly, but moving down to the slope.
oh,
So we had a lot of work on survey, but it's really going well, I think, now. So it's located in a good position in this moment. But I think that the restoration of this house was really one of the best of the restoration of modern movement. So we really wanted to announce that
Yes.
modern movement is
It's alive and well.
yes.
Yes.
You know, I should maybe mention Mies, even though he had never studied at the university the history of philosophy and so on, but he was very interested in philosophical thought and what the big thinkers were thinking. And his whole approach to his architecture was to express the significance, the essence of the modern times. And technology, the growth of technology was an important aspect. And I say that because in the Tugendhat house, there's one particular feature that is stunning. When you think that in 1929, something like this was possible, all the huge glass windows in the living area were able to be automatically, they were motorized from the basement, and they could be lowered, and the whole living area could become an open terrace
wow.
on a nice sunny day.
That sounds advanced even now,
Yes.
100 years
Yeah,
later.
sure.
Yeah.
It is incredible, in my opinion.
They're power windows, like in a car.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you showed the film, or who did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did it, yeah.
Where that was
So
yesterday.
it is still working,
Yeah,
which is magic, that it's still working.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's always
he,
magic.
he was always interested in such technological things, you know. That was part of the meaning to him of the modern times.
And Michelangelo Sabatino's new book on the Farnsworth House goes to incredible detail on the whole history of her ownership.
Yes.
Of,
And he even had a lecture 2 weeks ago in the Tugendhat house.
Oh, he did? Okay, great. Yeah, he's been a guest on the show several times.
I don't know if you heard my story the first time I went there, but Mies, my grandfather, sent to my mother Hedrick Blessing, black and white, 8 by 11 photographs of the house in 1951-52. I was a young teenage boy in Bavaria, and she gave me the pictures and says, you can decorate your bedroom with these pictures. So I was surrounded by Mies pictures at that age because I was fascinated. And it was so different looking than Bavarian houses.
Right.
Well, that's how you tell an architecture fan by what's pinned up in his room.
Right.
Yes.
Not football stars
Yes, right.
or pop stars,
Yes.
but houses.
Well,
Your grandfather's houses.
yeah.
I have a question for the two of you. You may agree on this or disagree with this, but it's something that gets discussed from time to time. Specific case, the Barcelona Pavilion was destroyed.
Yes.
And then later on, it was brought back, rebuilt.
Yeah.
So is
Also after World War II, of course.
Right, after
I
World-
was involved in that too.
Yeah. So my question is, some people think that rebuilding these destroyed structures is great because they get to live on, and others think that we're destroying some kind of purity of the original, and that just shouldn't happen. Where are you guys on this?
So it's quite complicated to answer for that because we are really taking attention for the authenticity, which is our very important things. Authenticity means that it's our Rembrandt is Rembrandt. Yeah.
Right. Not a copy.
Yeah, not a copy. But on the other hand, I think that there is a soul of the architecture, the soul of the story. So it's extremely important that the Barcelona Pavilion, in fact, was rebuilt again. In fact, the dream about the modern movement architecture represented by Mies in Barcelona Pavilion case was in fact realized in the case of family home in Brno, in Tugendhat house.
But the Barcelona Pavilion was, of course, meant to be a temporary structure. It never was meant to be a permanent building because it was at a World's Fair. And all these countries build these pavilions, and then they tear them down. Mm-hmm. But that building was in everybody's mind. I mean, even Philip Johnson in America had seen it and wrote and talked about it. And so eventually the people in Barcelona came up with the idea, we need to build this again, rebuild it. Yeah.
Wasn't the Eiffel Tower meant to be a temporary structure?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I mean, there's cases of structures that were meant to be temporary that
but
became...
to tear that down would have cost as much as...
Well, yeah, I wouldn't want that job.
I have to mention maybe one thing. This house will have a 100th of the year. So it's a real grandmother of modern movement architecture.
Yes.
Incredibly. So
that's right.
It's not from 50s.
Your 100th
really
anniversary is coming up.
Yeah.
So that's coming up in what year?
It was finished in 30.
30.
So we have 5 years to plan for the party?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Big
Wonderful.
party.
To order
Big
the
party.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, please invite us. We'll do podcasts from right alongside.
So what I was telling was the pictures I had.
Oh,
and
right.
a few years later, when I was a little older and more mature and I had made up my mind to study architecture, I came to Chicago to study at IIT under Mies, my grandfather. And the very first thing I wanted to do is to drive out to the Farnsworth house and see it because it'd been such a presence in my life already.
Was that one of the pictures that was on your bedroom wall?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, not one, it was several pictures, yeah. And I went there with a friend and we got to the property. There is a fence around the property. And we could see the house, and we stood there and said, how do we approach this? And then we noticed somebody in the house was moving around, and it turned out to be Edith Farnsworth. And she picked up from a coffee table binoculars on
Who
her,
are these kids?
on her eyes. And what I find so interesting is everybody always talks about all this glass made living in nature, a new way of not having solid walls and windows, but everything is open and visible. You could see any deer going anywhere, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Or the students standing out by the fence.
So the owner of the house, with the simple method of looking at you, looking at the house, we felt like some gun was pointed at us. You know, we didn't dare go in. We never went into the house, never said hello. We were chased away, basically, by that. And she was not very inviting to guests unless they were scheduled. Somebody that had...
Which is normal.
Arranged something.
Yeah.
But there were 10, 12 Japanese young architects coming to see the house from Japan. And they just walked up. And if you live there by yourself, do you want them to come at any hour? No.
No. It's very reasonable to expect people to schedule.
So Peter Palumbo finally decided to make it into a museum.
Yes.
And then it was sold, and the National Trust eventually owned it, took it over. So it's a museum now. And all you can do is go there and visit. And
you can visit both of these houses going online and get tickets for each of them. They are wonderful places to see if you're an architecture fan. They're very seminal, of course, to the whole modern movement. I want to close up with sharing a story about the night Mies almost died in Raleigh, North Carolina in early 1950. He was visiting our town to see the building under construction, Dorton Arena, which is a hyperbolic paraboloid agriculture facility. And he was invited to speak at NC State University, which had a brand new architecture program. Afterwards, the students did what they do with most of the guests. They took him out and got him drunk. Yep. On a second-floor walk-up of a theater on Hillsborough Street.
Yeah, the main drag near campus.
Yeah. So when the party was over, Mies left to exit, and he was a big guy, and he fell down the stairs and into a heap in the bottom. And the students all gathered around him because he wasn't moving, and they felt they had killed the great Mies van der Rohe, and they had no idea what they were going to do. And then about 5 minutes later, he came to and got up and kind of wandered down the street, and that was it. So
I heard this from you before.
Yes.
Now I know that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What year would that have been?
I believe that would have been around 50, 51, somewhere in there, because Dortmund Arena was still under construction at that point.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
That was 50, 51 was, in my opinion, the most progressive and active period in Mies's career. He did 860, 880 Lakeshore Drive high-rise buildings and revolutionized apartment houses. Crown Hall,
Yes.
Farnsworth House, and then soon thereafter came the Seagram building in New York.
Seagram.
Yeah.
It was
So,
quite crucial, I
I
think.
mean, he was super
Moment.
busy,
Yeah.
and in 1952, for the first time since he had been in Chicago, he came back to Germany,
Okay.
and he visited us, and I met him when I was 14 years old
Yes.
for the first time. And some local architects in the town where we lived, Freiburg, in the Black Forest, had asked my mother if they could meet the famous Mies. And a luncheon was arranged next to the cathedral in a very nice restaurant. And somehow she managed to get me also invited with all these architects. There were six architects.
You're a grandson.
Yeah, but I sat at the end of the table and he sat at the other end of the table. And they
You
talked
needed
about
Mrs. Farnsworth's binoculars.
that they talked about his work and
Yes.
doing. And Mies had in his coat pocket here, behind his kerchief, always some sharpened pencils. That was his habit. And he was explaining something to some of these architects, and he was taking the napkin, which was white, and sketched right on the napkin.
Sure.
Right. The famous architecture move.
I'm a 14-year-old, and I thought, my God, if you're an architect, you can do that? That's pretty good.
It's power.
You know,
Yeah.
that's power, yeah. I would not have been allowed to do that in my family.
Dirk, Iveta, thank you so much for talking with us. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We were speaking with Iveta Cerna and Dirk Lohan during Modernism Week 2025 in Palm Springs. Architect Max Strang, founder of Strang Design, has a deep connection with Gene Leedy, a key figure in the Sarasota School of Architecture. Strang grew up in a Leedy-designed home, was friends with Leedy and his family, worked in his office, and restored Leedy's home and office in Winter Haven. Known for his commitment to the environment, Strang's firm has honored Leedy's legacy through careful, authentic restoration, preserving the integrity of Leedy's groundbreaking designs. Plus, Max made a pretty great short film on Leedy. Here's George's poolside conversation with Max Strang.
Max, tell me what is so special about 1518 Drexel Avenue.
Well, 1518 Drexel Avenue is the house that the architect Gene Leedy, one of the Sarasota School famed practitioners, lived in for 60 plus years.
And what was he known for in Sarasota?
You know, he started his career in Sarasota in 1950, was there only about 4 years, but then he moved to Winter Haven, Florida, where he continued his career. So he is very special in the fact that he was just so prolific.
I first came across Gene Leedy really by accident. I had never heard of him years ago. And then we did a house tour for a really unusual house in Charlotte, North Carolina. Have you ever been to that house?
I have not, but I know you are referring to the Keelhack residence.
Uh-huh. That house has Leedy's famous double T concrete beams over a giant pool that's in the bottom floor. And I think it's been sold and renovated in the last few years.
Well, that's great to hear. I would love to check that out one day. I think it's a really unique Leedy project. It's the only one that I know of that used that beige-colored brick, in conjunction with the precast concrete.
So what is a double T, and how did he use it?
When I look back on Gene's career, I think that it is the precast concrete, and especially the precast concrete double T, that defines his career. The double T is this cast shape of concrete with steel embedded in it that actually looks like a letter T.
Like pi, a pi symbol, too, is also...
Kind of, yeah. No, there's a single T and a double T.
Okay.
Gene loved the double T for some reason, but you'll find it in all different sorts of configurations throughout his work, throughout his career.
I think people would have seen the double T in highway construction, which is used quite a lot.
Correct. You see some massive double Ts in industrial and transportation technology, but Gene adapted it, and made it a more residential scale, and he just loved the fact that at the time it was economical to use to achieve very large spaces.
So how did he use it in a house?
So when he used it in homes, the first house he used it in was called the Ellison Residence in Winter Haven, Florida in 1953. Coincidentally, this was the exact same time that Gordon Bunshaft used it for his own residence in the Hamptons. And there's an interesting story there.
Yeah.
This is all about influence of architecture and how architects influenced each other with their work and their concepts. And in 1958, an architect named Tim Siebert in Sarasota used these double Ts for a beach pavilion on Siesta Key. And it's this beautiful freestanding structure. It's still there on Siesta Key. I believe Gene was influenced by that particular project, and, a year or two later, he built a similar structure, but enclosed it in glass. And Gene claimed it was the first all precast office building in the world.
Huh.
Yep. And then...
was that for his own office?
There was two buildings in this complex, one of which was his own office, and the other was for, I believe, a realtor, which was right next door.
Okay.
So they kind of make a little compound together. So about this same time, fun fact that Louis Skidmore from SOM was living in Winter Haven. And actually, he passed away, I think, in 1960, 61, something like that. So undoubtedly, Gordon Bunshaft from SOM was visiting with Louis Skidmore, and I think undoubtedly as well got to meet Gene Leedy or go to his office and see all of these plans for precast double T buildings. So to me, I want to dig a little bit deeper and find this out, but I think kind of a race was on. And Gordon Bunshaft's version, I think it's also called the Travertine House or the Bunshaft Residence, was in the Hamptons. And notably, he didn't have the broad overhangs of the double T that Gene's house, the Ellison Residence in Winter Haven, did. And that just reflects the climactic, responses. Sure. But the history of the Bunshaft house is interesting because it went on. Martha Stewart owned it. It was donated to MoMA. I think MoMA gave it back. There was part of a neighbor's squabble. It got torn down, yada, yada, yada. But that was a loss. But Leedy's version of pretty much a very similar house, it still stands there in Winter Haven. It's worth checking out.
And when Gene Leedy died, I believe it was 2018, you took over the restoration of his house and his office.
Correct. First was the house. A year before Gene passed, Hurricane Irma passed right over the house, caused some damage. A bunch of walls came down. A year later, Gene passed away. And his family and the Strang family have always been very close. They approached me about buying the house and restoring it. So we embarked upon that project. And after we, mostly finished that, the Leedy family said, okay, Max, now you got to get the office and fix that up too.
Yeah.
So we did.
As if you didn't have anything else to do because you're a very successful architect.
Yeah, but sometimes passion projects, will sneak in there.
Well, let's talk about one of those passion projects. You made a wonderful film about Gene Leedy. Tell me about that.
Correct. So several years ago, I think it was actually during the pandemic, and when we were still amidst the renovation project, we started just a little small architectural documentary film called The Gene Leedy Influence, and it actually premiered here at Modernism Week in Palm Springs.
And what was it about? I mean, how did you capture Gene's buildings and his personality in life?
So it was a lot about celebrating his legacy and educating people about Gene Leedy. A lot of people had heard of the Sarasota School, but not necessarily Leedy. I knew that, having grown up in Winter Haven, having grown up in a Leedy house, having worked for him, yada, yada, yada.
Thank you, George Costanza.
Yes. It's all about levels. No, I just knew there was a lot to get out there.
Yeah.
And the film was one of many facets of an awareness campaign of Leedy's legacy.
I love the opening scene of that. Would you describe the opening scene of your film where you're smoking cigars?
So, we were sitting by the pool.
Who was with you?
I was with Ingram Leedy, who is Gene's son. And growing up in Winter Haven through adolescence and whatnot, Ingram and I were very close friends. And That's one of the reasons why I actually ended up spending a lot of time at the Leedy residence, is because, you're always hanging out there. So for the film, it was fun just to, smoke cigars by the pool and reminisce. I don't smoke cigars. That was pretty much a prop thing for me, but,
Great scene, though. I loved it.
Yeah. So when we started the renovation of the house, we created a little LLC called Scotch and Cigars LLC. So that's a little nod to two of Gene's favorite things.
Activities?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any place that people can see the film? Is it on YouTube or streaming?
It is. I think it's on YouTube. I think you can also access it through the Architecture Sarasota website.
Okay.
It's called A Gene Leedy Influence. And there's another little film about the house and the office that Open Spaces did. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Open Spaces series.
Yes.
That was about a year ago. They came and stayed at the house for several days and shot that. And that also is a great way to learn more about the Leedy legacy.
Yeah, they've put out a lot of really good films.
Correct. We're in great company there.
What kind of buildings did Gene do that weren't residences? What were some of the commercial or institutional buildings that he did in Florida?
He did the Winter Haven City Hall as a civic building. It still stands to this day. There is talk about that. The city has outgrown that city hall from the 50s, and they're probably going to build a new one. And there is the desire to turn the existing one into maybe a cultural art museum or something like that. I think it would lend itself well to that. Gene also designed a lot of banks. One in particular is I think it's the First National Bank of Cape Canaveral at the time. And it was, again, another precast building that was made to go higher if needed. It's a great building. He designed the USF President's House at the University of South Florida. And just a lot of like doctors' offices, commercial work. He worked across a lot of different types of architecture.
It really is a splendid array of design that's throughout Sarasota, Winter Haven sort of area, all through there. Not only to fit the climate for people having second homes or living there, but I remember this excitement about the banks. I mean, every bank wanted to be about the future.
Yep.
Every bank wanted to show their customers that the old past was gone and the future was going to be bright. We're going to be all like the Jetsons flying around, and that the banks reflected this kind of design, didn't it?
Correct, it did. And, I think what better material to convey safety and sturdiness for your money than precast concrete. So, at least that worked well with Gene. And on the interior side of those banks, Gene had a friendship with the abstract expressionist artist Sid Solomon, and really convinced Sid to make larger and larger paintings that would fit in the lobbies of these banks. So I think there's an interesting, fun connection there. And Gene would later go on to design a house for Sid Solomon on Siesta Key.
Sarasota's had some significant hurricane damage in the last year. How are things recovering down there?
It's getting better. I think the most tragic loss was Paul Rudolph Sanderling cabanas, right? Those ones that are there, right there, perched on the edge of the Gulf of Mexico. And they got flattened by Hurricane Helene, the first of the storms that hit last fall. But some of the other well-known Sarasota school buildings, the Revere Quality House, that got 4 feet of water in it, and I believe the big tree in front of the umbrella house came down, but the house itself is okay. But it's just a reminder that these buildings aren't going to last forever, and we need to really cherish them and enjoy them while we got them.
I've been to some of those houses, and 4 feet of water in that house is very significant. I mean, that's coming up your wall 4 feet high.
I got 4 feet of water in my own house during that, too.
Yeah?
So, yeah. So we're getting our act back together. Sarasota's getting its act back together. But it seems like the past 6 months, with the fires in L.A. and the storms in Florida, modernist architecture is really, it's shown how vulnerable it really is.
Yes. Particularly the kinds of modern architecture that was made out of wood and not concrete.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Just blows right on down.
Thankfully, Gene's later work was not in wood. It was in the solid concrete. It could last. And another fun fact, I think it's that Keelhack residence that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
That was in the movie Carrie 2, which
Really?
is some horror flick, and it's a big flaming fire inferno goes on in that building. So anyhow.
I did not know that. I will have to add that to our records now.
You can thank me later for having you sit through that whole movie, but you should see the scene there.
We visited this house when it was for sale last, I believe, and very nice lady that opened it up for us. But the house was full of cats
Oh, no.
and full of cat pee.
Oh, no.
She was a hoarder.
Oh, no.
I don't know how they persuaded somebody to buy it, but I guess they had a lot of imagination because, of course, the house itself was fine.
Well, how was the tour? How was the how did that go?
I went to the door and I talked to this very nice lady, walked around the house for like 90 seconds. I went out to the bus and said, well, I got the good news and the bad news here. The good news is you're going to see a spectacular house. The bad news is it's full of cats and cat pee.
Okay.
So it was one of our most unusual architecture tours.
Well, hey, we're leveraging that experience to talk about architecture today,
Yeah,
right?
when in Rome.
Yes, yeah.
Right? Do all that. What kind of projects are you working on personally now in Florida?
My firm is based in Miami. We're a good-sized firm.
40, 50 people?
45, 46 people right now. And we're blessed with a lot of good projects right now. We have some projects in the Florida Keys that we just finished, some others. I think we've developed into a coastal expert type of firm.
Yeah.
We're predominantly residential, but we have some other hospitality-based projects and some other, urban planning projects as well. So I don't know. We're having fun. We're obviously we have the DNA of the Sarasota School that runs through our projects, and part of that DNA is ongoing experimentation and ongoing kind of innovation. So we're doing some unique things, a lot of it with concrete, because that is the way we build in South Florida to withstand the hurricane wind speeds and whatnot. But, I haven't done any projects with the precast concrete system.
Yeah.
One, just to let that be Gene's realm and not be too impacted by that. But I think if you look at our work, you can see that I was influenced by the repetition of those concrete elements, and you'll see that through our work.
Well, Max, thanks so much for stopping by. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. This is the first time we've got to meet in person.
Correct.
And I'm glad you're having a good time here in Palm Springs.
Having a great time, and let's get you down to Winter Haven, Florida sometimes, and you can check out that Gene Leedy house at 1518 Drexel in person too.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Okay, Tom, it's happy hour, and it's our turn.
Okay, visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Conscientious is her middle name, or it could be Clara. We really don't know, and she won't tell us.
We're not making this up. She really won't tell us.
U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I will be back next week and in 2 weeks with more guests from Palm Springs.